And the result was the people turning to Gideon in verse 22 of Judges 8 and asking him to rule over them, have his sons rule over them, have his grandsons rule over them, because he had saved them from the hands of Midian. And so God had made this huge delivery with 300 men. They had destroyed their enemies. And the first thing the people do is turn to Gideon and say, because you saved us, we want you to be our king. And we want you to set up a dynasty because we want your sons to then follow and be our kings, and we want their sons to follow and be their kings because we want to be able to look and say, we've got somebody that's going to save us when our enemies rise up against us. And why did God reduce them down to the army of 300? So that no one would say it was their hands that delivered them from the enemies, but only God's hands. And sure enough, man, as soon as the victory comes, they turn and they say, Gideon, you're the guy. So Gideon's answer in verse 23 is, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And so it looks like Gideon's like on track. All right, at least he learned the lesson. And at least he acknowledges that God is the only one that gave victory over that battle, over that war, and everything was good. But let's keep going to see how it shook out from there. Verse 24, Judges 8. Gideon said to them, let me make one request of you. Every one of you must give me an earring from his spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw it in the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that was requested was 1,700 shekels, which is about 50 pounds of gold. And besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels, and Gideon made an ephod out of it and put it in his city in Ophrah. And all of Israel whored after it, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Jerubbaal, which is Gideon, the son of Joash, went in and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons with his own offspring, for he had many wives, and his concubine was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash's father at Ophrah of the Abezerites. And so you've heard that phrase from Jesus saying, they acknowledge me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And I don't believe Gideon started that way. I think he was sincere when he said, look, God has got to rule over you. God just delivered us from the hands of all of our enemies. It was God that gave us the victory. But in time, that acknowledgement, that proclamation in his lips, didn't control his heart for the long term. So you can look at this and say, man, Gideon didn't finish strong. So we want to learn from that and say, we want to finish strong. And we want to see how his example led into his the next generation, his son's example. But even though Gideon rejected the kingship in word, his lifestyle from then on kind of projected a kingship lifestyle. He said, hey, no, I'm not going to be your king, but can you give me spoils from your war? Give me all the earring. Give me your one earring from each person. And he took all the ornaments of the kings. He took their crescents. He took their robes. He took all the camels' ornaments. I think there was like 800 camels. So it was more than just 50 pounds of gold. He took all the spoils, and he lived a pretty lavish lifestyle from there. He had many wives. He had 70 sons, and he had a concubine. And the concubine had a son, and they named him Abimelech, which means, my father is a king. I think he just sold himself out right there. No, God is your king. But I'm going to live like a king. I'm going to act like a king. And I'm going to name my son, my father is the king, but I'm not going to be your king. Oh, by the way, I'm going to take all your spoils, and I'm going to make an ephod, and I'm going to put it so that we can get direction and guidance from the Lord. And the people right there should have said, wait, that's a priest role. We've got one of those. It's in the house of the Lord. But they didn't. They said, great idea, Gideon. And it says Israel whored after the ephod. And they were drawn into idol worship. They were drawn into foreign god worship. And they went right back to where they were before they were consumed by the Amalekites for those 7 years. They forgot everything. And they were back in idolatry. And Psalm 106:36 says they served idols, which became a snare to them, which I would say is the biggest understatement of the year. This is the last time in Judges we already saw the last time. This is the first time we will not see anymore, and the land had peace for 40 years, but it doesn't say what it's been saying the rest of the time, and they had rest. They had peace, but they had no rest. And so they had peace for this next phase, but they didn't have any more rest. And now instead of a cycle, we've been on a cycle of worship foreign idols, get in trouble, call out to God, get delivered, worship foreign idols, get oppressed, call out to God, get delivered. Now we don't see the cycle anymore. Now we just see the spiral down in Israel's history. So in verse 35 it says, as soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side, and they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. And so they forgot the Lord, and in return they forgot Gideon. And someone said forgetfulness was the number one enemy of Israel. I would have to say Baal worship was the number one enemy of Israel. And we're going to look at the nation as a whole next week and how that all went for them. But after Gideon died, he's led this lifestyle of the famous kings. And in verse 1 of chapter 9, one of his sons raises up his head. And it's the son that stands for my father is the king. So in verse 1 of chapter 9, it says, now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them and to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. And so my father is the king rises up. He looks down the aisle. He sees 70 sons of Gideon. He recognizes that it's going to be a little power struggle here. And he's on the outside looking in because he is the son of the concubine. They're all sons of wives. So he runs to his mom's town of Shechem. And he says to them, hey, listen to my logic here. There's 70 sons of my father Gideon, born of his wives. I am the son of a concubine. I am one of you guys. I'm a Shechemite because his mom was a Shechemite. Who would you rather rule over you? Me, flesh and blood from the town of Shechem, or those guys who are all Jewish descent? And if you choose that you want one of those guys to rule over you, how in the world are you going to choose who it is? So wouldn't it just make sense to honor me, elect me, king me, knight me, do whatever you need to do to me to make me the most important of all my brothers? And they bit. Verse 3. His mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, and their hearts were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. And so his family gathered up this logic. They took it to the leaders of Shechem. They pitched the deal. They bit. The leaders of Shechem says, we think he should represent us. Give him some money to make this so. They went into Baal's temple. They took 70 pieces of silver, and they gave it to Abimelech and says, make it so. Now, some people think that the only way they could have gotten into Baal's temple treasury was for Abimelech to declare allegiance to Baal. It's probably not a far step, because he's not going to say, I'm going to represent God and be funded out of Baal. He's probably got to put some allegiance into Baal. And so as he does that, they say, here's the money, go make it happen. And he hires what we call worthless and reckless fellows. It's just a band of thugs. It's a mob of guys to go have him take place what he's got on his heart to do. Now, the thing about this Baal-berith is it's a god of the Philistines that they're now worshiping, which we'll get to next week. Verse 5. He went to his father's house in Ophrah, and he killed his brothers, the son of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And so he does exactly what he says he's going to do. How are you going to pick between the 70 and me? You're not, because I'm going to kill them all. The thing is, Jotham, the youngest kid, fled. He just got out of there, and he was spared. Verse 6, all the leaders of Shechem came together, and all at Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar of Shechem. So they go to Ophrah, they kill the brothers, they come back to Shechem, and they're like, okay, now it's done. There's no rival, there's no opposition. Abimelech's playing on their desire to have a king. He presents himself as the king, and he says, now all he stands in the way is for me to be recognized and coronated and made king. So they all come together at Beth Millo, and they went and they made him king. And the details are at the oak of the pillar at Shechem. Now, if you guys remember, we were walking through Joshua. Shechem was a huge place in the history of Israel. It's where God spoke to Abraham and said, this land will be your inheritance. This is the promised land. Your inheritance will be all of this land. Your people will be more than the sand of the seashore. You'll never be able to count them all. This all took place at Shechem. God appeared to Jacob in Shechem. That's where they wrestled, and then Jacob buried all of his household gods and called upon the name of God. It's where Moses brought the people, and they declared the curses and the blessings of God on Mount Gerizim. Curses if they disobey, blessings if they obey. And then Joshua brought them back to Shechem when they came into the promised land and did the exact same thing. And then he brought them back for the final time to have the final speech to say, look, you guys just need to follow God. And if you chase after the foreign idols of this world and of this land, you're going to perish. But if you cling to God, you'll be blessed according to his promises. Shechem was a huge place in God reminding the people of who he was and that he was God of all of Israel. And now Abimelech has taken this opportunity to go back to Shechem at the oak where God originally spoke to Abraham and declare himself what? King. It's like, it's amazing he didn't just get smoked right there. But he's taking the opportunity to the location where God says, I am God over Israel. I am the king. I'm the only king. And Abimelech declares himself king, and the people of Shechem buy it hook, line, and sinker. And he's doing his own thing under the auspices of Baal-berith, the god of the Philistines. And he basically takes the most sacred place of Israel and just turns it into this stench. The sham of saying, I'm the king. It doesn't go well from there. So whether it's during the ceremony or whether it's after the ceremony has taken place, in verse 7, when it was told to Jotham what was going on, he went and stood at the top of Mount Gerizim, and he cried aloud and said to them, and I get this picture. I think it's probably during the coronation. Jotham, the youngest brother, the littlest guy, stands at the Mount of Gerizim where the blessings of God were proclaimed over the nation of Israel. If you obey, you will be blessed by God. And he stands at the top. All right, remember it's a bowl. He says it so everybody can hear it at the coronation. And he tells them a parable. He cried aloud and said to them, listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. Here's the parable. The trees once went out to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, hey, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and go hold sway over the trees? So then the trees went to the fig tree and they said, come, reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the trees? And the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine that cheers God and men and go hold sway over the trees? And then the trees said to the bramble. And the bramble is like a thorn bush. You come reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, if you've acted, here's Jotham talking to him again. Now therefore, if you've acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian, And you have risen up against my father's house this day and have killed his son, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of the female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he's your relative. If then of you have acted in good faith and integrity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out of Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out of the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer and lived there because of Abimelech, his brother. And so here you got the youngest son proclaiming this parable over the leaders and the people of Shechem. And then he confronts them with truth. And the parable, you're not going to spend a whole lot of time on. Basically, it's calling out to worthy trees, fig trees, olive trees, the vine, which is grapevines, all bringing something to the table, produce in abundance. And the trees are like, no, we don't want to leave what we're doing to rule over the trees. So they keep looking. And they come upon the thorn bush and they say, he's not really doing much, not producing much fruit, but we're needing a king. So they ask the thorn bush, hey, will you rule over us? And the thorn goes, well, yeah, I could do that, but it'll be conditional. You have to hide under my shade. Now think about huge trees looking down upon a thorn bush. And the thorn bush says, yeah, I'll be your king, but you got to come underneath my shade. And Jotham's going, guys, let this sink in a little bit. How in the world are the trees, the majestic cedars of Lebanon, going to hide in the shade of a bramble bush, of a thorn bush? But what are the trees' response? We'll do that. We'll jump in. Then Jotham confronts him with truth and says, look, have you dealt worthily with my dad's family? With my dad's history? With his legacy? In destroying his kids? If you have, then God bless you. God bless Abimelech. God bless your future. But today, consider how you treated my dad and his family and his legacy. The dad that delivered you from the hand of Midian. The dad that you wanted to make king over you. Think back. It's not that long. And if you've dealt wrong with him, may fire come out of Abimelech and consume you, and may fire come out of you and consume Abimelech. And so he basically prophesies over them on the Mount of Blessings. If you have blessed my dad, Gideon, blessings upon you. If you have cursed my dad and his legacy, may curses be upon you. And then what's Jotham do? He runs away. Because he's done his job. Now it's up to Shechem to take in what the prophecy and the parable has had, and they got to make a decision. Verse 22. And Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years. There's your decision. Oh, Jotham, he's just a little kid. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And that parable, what does that even mean? And so they go ahead with the coronation. They make Abimelech king. And it looks like everything's good. It's all good, right? 3 years of peace. 3 years of rest. 3 years of we're just doing our own thing. No harm, no foul, no consequences, no cursing, no parable being fulfilled. It's all good. And they're 3 years into this. And then we read those words, but God. Now, it's not in there, but God, it's like, okay, we're done here. And in verse 23, it says, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech, their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to kill his brother. And the leaders of Shechem put men in ambush against him on the mountaintops, and they robbed all who passed by along the way, and it was told to Abimelech. And so it looks like everything's going well, and then God says, you know what? It's time to intervene. It's time to intervene in Abimelech's life. It's time to intervene in Shechem's life. And Shechem can't say, hey, he made us do it. God says, look, you paid for the financing of the destruction of his family. You're as much to blame in this situation as Abimelech is. And so God raised up the spirit for them to rebel. Man, that's a whole sermon right there. But we just got to trust that God is going to use all of this to get Israel where they need to get. And if he wants to stir up a spirit to turn a city against a leader, we don't get it, but it's true. And the rebellion came for them to just go out into the byways and the highways and to start raiding the caravans, which basically meant they would steal the stuff of the traders that would pass to and fro, which gave Abimelech a huge black eye as king. Dude can't even control his city that anointed him king. Now they're raiding caravans. Our passageways aren't safe. Nobody's going to come and trade with us. And it says Abimelech was told what was going on. That's one front. The city of Abimelech is rising up against, the city of Shechem is rising up against Abimelech as a whole. And then in verse 26, Gaal, the son of Eben, moved into Shechem with his relatives and the leaders of Shechem, and they put confidence in him. So now you got an individual rising into Shechem. And he starts doing the rubbing shoulders thing. And he may start judging and ruling a little bit, and the people go, hey, Gaal's got onto something. He's somebody we should put our confidence in. And they did. In verse 27, they went out into the field and gathered the grapes from their vineyards, and they trod them and held a festival, and they went into the house of their God and ate and drank and reviled Abimelech. So get this picture. It's harvest time. It's grape season, and they had this huge wine festival. Nothing Epcot ain't got on these guys. And during this festival, they're eating, they're drinking, they're worshiping. And in that, this revilement of Abimelech comes up, spearheaded by Gaal. And he's like, hey, verse 28, Gaal the son of Eben, who is Abimelech, and who are we of Shechem that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? Would that this people were under my hand, and I would remove Abimelech. And I would say to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. So basically, he's got a little bit too much wine in him, and he's starting to spout out what's in his heart. And his heart is, why are we following Abimelech in the first place? He's only a half-blood. Me? I'm full in on Shechem. My father and my mother. And I wouldn't do things the way Abimelech does things. So we shouldn't serve him anymore. If you guys made me king, I'd take care of Abimelech and his army. Now, you can't wake up the next morning and go, sorry, I had too much grape juice. I didn't mean any of that. No, every word that came out of his mouth, he's now accountable for. And in verse 30, when Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Eben, his anger was kindled. And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly, saying, behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his relatives have come to Shechem, and they're stirring up the city against you. Now, the city had already been stirred up against him, right? On the raiding the caravans level. Now it's an internal thing. Now it's personal. Now therefore go by night, you and the people who are with you, and set an ambush in the field. Then in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, rise early and rush upon the city, and when he and his people who are with him come out against you, you may do to them as your hand finds to do. And so the governor of Abimelech is at least loyal to him. He sends word to Abimelech and says, look, Gaal and his family, they had a party last night, and the whole town is against you. And they're all looking to Gaal to be the leader. This is what you need to do. You need to surprise attack Shechem. You need to come at night. You need to set up your troops. And when they come out, you need to come in. And you'll know what to do from there. So in verse 34, Abimelech and all the men who were with him rose up by night and set an ambush against Shechem in 4 companies. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood at the entrance of the city of the gate. And Abimelech said to the people, Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from the ambush. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, all right, so this is the rebel turning to the governor as they stand at the city gate. As Abimelech and all his troops rise up to set ambush, And he says, look, people are coming down from the mountaintops. And Zebul said to him, you mistake the shadows of the mountains for men. Gaal spoke again and said, look, people are coming down from the center of the land. And one company is coming from the direction of the diviner's oak. And then Zebul turns to him and says, okay, where's your mouth now? Wasn't it you who said, who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Are not these people whom you despised? So go out now and fight with them. And Gaal went out at the head of the leaders of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him, and many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Abimelech lived at Aramu, and Zebul drove Gaal and his relatives so that they could not dwell at Shechem. Abimelech takes Zebul's counsel. He rallies his troops. He comes out, and then Zebul, if it wasn't so sad, it would be a little bit laughable, taunts Gaal at the gate. Gaal's like, dude, looks like there's troops coming our way. And Zebul's like, no, it's just the shadows. The sun's rising. No, it really looks like there's troops coming this way. No, you had too much to drink last night. It must be the hangover. No, I seriously see troops coming our way. And Zebul looks at him and says, okay, put up or shut up. Where's your mouth now? Where's your rebellious heart that you had last night? Where is all this that was pent up in you that you're going to destroy Abimelech and all his armies? Go. Make it happen. So Gaal can't assemble by himself, right? So he has to go back into Shechem, and he calls all the leadership together. And remember last night? Well, now's do or die. And the leaders assemble the people of Shechem, and they go out and they fight. And they get destroyed. And Gaal has to move out of town. And Abimelech lives in Arumah. And Zebul's still governor. And the people of Shechem probably go, man, that was a mess. Glad that's over with. But God's not done yet. And in verse 42, it says, on the following day, the people went out to the field, and Abimelech was told. And what was he told? The people are back in the field. So what? 43, he takes his people, he divides them into 3 companies and sets an ambush in the fields. And he looked and saw the people coming out of the city, so he rose against them and killed them. And Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the city gate, while the 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the field and killed them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he captured the city and killed the people who were in it. He razed the city and sowed it with salt. When the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard it, they entered the stronghold and the house of El-Berith. Abimelech was told that all the leaders of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, and he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down the bundle of brushwood and took it up and laid it on his shoulder. And he said to the men who were with him, what you have seen me do, hurry and do as I have done. So every one of the people cut down this bundle, and following Abimelech, put it against the stronghold. And they set the stronghold on fire over them, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. So the next day, people of Shechem's like, okay, that was a debacle, but it's life as usual, right? We're going to go right back in the fields. And it wasn't. Because God wasn't done dealing with the judgment upon Shechem. And we hate these kind of stories. Because he's using an evil guy, Abimelech, to come back against the city of Shechem to pay judgment for what they had done in funding the annihilation of Gideon's family. And so Abimelech leads the troops back in. They seal off the city gate. They trap the people in the fields. They destroy everybody that's in the fields. Then they set their sights into the city. They destroy the city. They raze it. Then they cover it with salt. So much in that. But they're not done yet. Because the people of the Tower of Shechem, the leaders of Shechem, have access to this stronghold. And they locked themselves inside, and they said, well, at least we're going to survive. At least Shechem's not going to be completely destroyed. And sure enough, Abimelech finds out about it, and he goes and he gets Ramble. I think I've heard that before. He tells his troops, do what I do. Unfortunately, this is not Gideon's do what I do. This is, hey, go get more bramble to put at the bottom of the tower of Shechem so we can destroy the people of Shechem. They do it. They light the bramble on fire. The fire consumes the tower, and everybody in the tower is destroyed. The interesting thing about the tower is it's the Tower of El-Berith, which is the Tower of Baal, and he couldn't protect them. And we think it's finally over, okay? The devastation's over. The prophecy's been fulfilled. And then verse 50, it says, Abimelech then went to Thebez and encamped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and all the men and the leaders of the city fled to it and shut themselves in it, and they went up to the roof of the tower. Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. Worked the first time. Verse 53, a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said, draw your sword and kill me, lest they say of me, a woman killed me. The young man thrust him through, and he died. When the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, everyone departed to his home. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads, and upon them the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. So we're not sure why Abimelech had to consume the Tower of Thebez. They were either allies of Shechem, or they were just the next one in line, and his rage was so huge. People speculate either way, but the truth of the matter is, because he continued his rage, and the prophecy said nothing about Thebez, he got to Thebez, everybody runs to the tower, and he's like, I know what to do. We're just going to burn them out again, just like we did in Shechem. But as he goes to do that, an unnamed, undefined woman of Thebez drops a millstone, which is like a brick, about 1.5 feet by 6 inches, on his head, and it kills him. When he looks up and sees that it was a woman, he's like, somebody's got to kill me, because I don't ever want to go with the legacy of a woman killed me. Hate when that happens. Because my name is so honored right now, I don't want to die at the hand of a woman. Just gives a little bit of insight of what's going on in his brain. So he tells his armor bearer to run him through so he'll die valiantly. You just imagine the compassion of God saying, it could have been different. It should have been different. Because God gave the whole parable, the whole prophecy, before it even took place through Jotham. Hey, if you think you guys are dealing righteously, then keep going and look for God's blessing. But if you have not dealt righteously, pause, chill, reflect, evaluate, and see where you got off track. And God says the same thing to each one of us. Some of us are running down a road, and God goes, you need to take a break here. You need to pause, and you need to reflect what direction you're going. And if you're going down a righteous road, keep going and look for God's blessings. But if you're getting off track, you need to reevaluate what got you on this track in the first place. Because God says, when judgment comes, and when I stir this up to bring about righteous judgment because of my perfect love, because of a downward spiral, it's not going to end well if you keep going your direction. Never, ever. Even if you go 3 years and it looks all good. God says, I have to intervene because of my love for my people, because of my love for the individual. And God loved Abimelech as much as he loved Jotham. He loved all 70 sons. He heard the cry of their blood spilt. He says, I have to intervene. But what he asks us as believers is to let him intervene before he has to intervene. That's why we sing songs like, I surrender. We don't even know what it means. But it's like a covering of, God, if I'm off track anywhere, I want to give that to you because I don't want to keep running down a road that's not of you. But if we defiantly know it's not of him and we keep running, God will intervene in ways that we're like, how could he have done? Why would he send an evil spirit to tempt the city of Shechem into rebellion? Because he's God, and he's got every right to do whatever he chooses to do to get us back on track. Even to use an enemy or an enemy spirit, because that's how much he loves us. But when we kick against that, we bring the curses of the mountain rather than the blessings of the mountain. And God says you're going to reap what you sow. And if you reap death and destruction, you're going to get that. If you reap humility and blessing, you're going to get that. Does that mean my life's going to be completely perfect? No. Things are going to come against that. But the end result is God says, I'm going to see you through all that. But God loved them enough to warn them of the truth. God loves each one of us to warn us enough of the truth. The question is, are we going to listen to the truth, or are we going to keep doing our own thing? The people of Shechem looked at a half notion of Jotham. What a crazy parable. They wrote him off, and they just followed Abimelech all the way to their destruction. Because God says it will come to pass. So this is the story of the individual. Next week, it's the story of the entire nation. And God's trying to teach him something through an individual. Hey, don't do this. And then what's the nation do? We think we're going to try that. And they start doing their own thing as a nation. Why? Because they started looking to a man and saying, you lead us, you guide us, you be king over us. And that never goes well when we get our sights set on a person. And it's easy to point our finger at Abimelech and say, dude, wrecked an entire city for no reason. But we look around and say, what have we chosen to do on our own strength, on our own upbuilding, trying to give glory to ourselves? Hey, make me in charge of this, or make me king of this. And God goes, you know what? Without a humble heart, that's not going to go well. So he wants us to evaluate ourselves and just say, look, let me take that pause, let me take that break and see where I might be getting off track, so that he doesn't have to send that intervention that never looks good. So let's pray this morning.